Hello, hello, everyone. It's lovely to see you all here again this morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to day 3. Today we're going to be starting with a seminar on statistical business registers. And our first speakers are currently still running in. But first, I'd like to invite the 2 chairs from yesterday, Mr. Rajesh Kumar Sharma and Fazrul Azlan Ortham, to come up and to present their summary of yesterday's sessions. Could you kindly come up and take your places on the rostrum?
A very good morning to all of you. So let me just share what we have discussed yesterday morning. It was a pretty productive session. We had the 6 presentations and all were in the very diverse topics of the environment and natural resources. We discussed under the CR framework how we can formulate, devise the material flow accounts, the forest asset accounts, and the energy accounts. Also, we found that the material flow accounts, the indicators, the resource use efficiency and all those, is quite low in the Asia Pacific region. So there is a lot of potential to catch up. Also, we find that we don't have an option of non-availability of economic statistics because there is a cost involved into that. And if we are not having such system, we are not able to quantify the assets of forests, the assets of other resources, water, energy, etc. Also, we discussed what should be the plan of the National Statistics offices. And we understood that let us identify the sources of data, the administrative data is quite preferable since it is interdisciplinary in nature. So we have to collaborate with the various agencies, various administrative agencies, NGOs. Also we have to include universities and the international organizations also. We need to devise a plan together. What is our common goal? The timelines, harmonize the methodologies of data collection, the standards. Also, we found that there is a need for the greater international cooperation because the environment and natural resources knows no boundary. So the statistics also, we need that each and every country should have this system. And how we can do that? We can do that with just exchange of our own practices and ideas. So that was the summary what we have discussed. Now the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajesh. For the second session in the afternoon, we have 5 presenters for the national accounts. And basically, after the 5 presentation, we can see that they are looking at 2 approaches. There is the production approach and the final expenditure approach. As any dreams of national accountants, any of you who are in the national accounts, you are going to be very happy if you can have all your quantity movers. Make it your life easier because of the quantity movers at the constant. You just need price indices, a good price indices to have the current prices. But what your dream is not going to be happening if there are resources involved and costs involved, and you have to make use what the best available indicators for you to have a look at your GDP. Of course, to have the IPI on monthly, to have the index of services, index of agriculture, to have the quantity movers, is very, very good. But do we need to have that all? Then what you have now, is it sufficient to have that as your movers for your GDP? And as I said, there are the recommendations is already there in the SNA, and the estimation methods is the balancing item method, as I said earlier, commodity flow method, and the benchmark ratio method. That is widely discussed, and it is basically practiced among the nations that have GDP. But I like to say a little bit of it, and has been raised by Mr. Joseph, the question, cost and usage. Does the cost to produce such indicators outweighs the usage? Or the usage outweighs the cost? It's going to be a strike of balance. It's good to have, but do you really need to have it? Of course, to have all the indicators involve cost, you need to have surveys every month. You need to have price surveys, producer price index, consumer price index. You need to have the IPI. You need to have the index of services. You need to have the agriculture indexes. Of course, that is good to have. But looking at your current situation, can you have it all? That is always the questions of national accountants, and the timeliness also. And for the 3 papers on the capital stock, on the informal sectors, and the revisions of the recommendations of SNA 2008, for those who are still not moving from 1993 to 2008, do you need to move that fast? Because SNA 2008, you need to do a lot of things. One of the things about, I think, I presented a paper on the GFP, good for processing, which you need to have a collaboration on your balance of payment. Then you can implement that for your SNA recommendations. The storage issues, that is one of the other things that should be considered if you want to move to SNA 2008. There are lots of things that actually moving from 1993 to 2008. And for the informal sectors, also Joseph raised the question, the informal in the formal sectors. That is the thing that happening now. I think one paper from the UK, ONS, have said about the sharing economy now. That the momentum is raising now. You can see the Airbnb, the Uber, the Grab are all there, but the measurement needs to be, you need to count, because this Uber and Grab, they are a platform, but at the end, the household is going to benefit because they are receiving the fees for matching. It's like a matchmaking. You want a taxi, you click, then Uber will find you a taxi for you. It is simple, but the calculation, of course, there are fees, you can put it in your supply side, but at the end, the total of the household will benefit for your transport fees. It is different from the conventional, where the transportation is purely by the airlines. But now they're sharing the equipment with the household side. Okay, and lastly, it's always to start small rather than having nothing. It's a small start, then you further progress in terms of building your national accounts system. Start it small. At the end, you reach the destination better. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Otham and Mr. Sharma. I'd just like to quickly introduce how we're going to run the SBR session for a moment. We're going to break up the session on SBRs into 3 little subsections. Firstly, Matthew Powell will present on general business register design with his lovely papers to present as well. We're going to then have a discussion on administrative data led by Matthew Shearing. And then after lunch, we'll finalise with probabilistic data matching led by Joseph from ADB. And the theme effectively is to talk about our business register design, what we're trying to utilise, what are some from the region, and then leak into administrative data and how important that is to business registers. And then finally, probabilistic data matching, which is about how can we make best utilisation of this administrative data sources when we don't have clear linking and without spending exorbitant resources on it. So I'd like to please invite up Matthew Powell and Lian Suhani to take a seat on the rostrum. And just briefly, Matthew Powell is a senior consultant with Oxford Policy Management, and he works on economic statistics. Previously, he worked for the UK Office for National Statistics on price statistics and national accounts, and he's worked on various DFID-funded projects, mainly in Africa and the South Pacific, and he's now currently based in Southeast Asia.
No, that's the other Matthew. I'm based in Oxford.
Oxford, oh. My apologies. Thank you.
Do I press this button here?
Yes.
Yes. You can all hear me. So thank you very, very much, Michael, for asking me to chair this session. Because it's, I feel very excited to present it, not just because of this. I'm privileged to be doing this, not just because of the subject itself, but also because I'm not a business register specialist. So I'm encroaching on your territory a bit as an economic statistician. But I've right all throughout my career, from the beginning of in the South Pacific to working in Africa and then in the UK statistics, and in the what do I press to move on? Of course, to the next slide. What do I press? Is there a button when I want to move to the next slide? What do I do? This one.
Yes.
Okay. So this one, up, down. There. Okay. Okay, I'll try that. Right from the beginning, I've been aware of that the registers lie at the heart of everything which we're doing here as economic statisticians. Just in the same way that the census underlies everything that the social statisticians are doing. And so we've got 3 papers here. Very interesting papers, and they're really all telling the story of and the drama of setting up a business register and developing a business register. First, we've got Liam Suhani, who is here with us in the flesh. Yeah. Just and she is head of the Subdirectorate of Standardization and Classification and the development of statistics with BPS Indonesia. And then we have two papers, which unfortunately the authors are not here with us, so I will have to summarize them a bit myself. And there is one by Subhash Chandra Malik, who's the director of the CSO National Accounts Division, I think, for India. And then Mr. Oyubileg of the National Statistics Office of Mongolia. So without further ado, if I can call on Lien to present her paper. Thank you, Lien.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
How do we, I think we need some
Sorry.
guidance here.
Okay.
I just carry on and I go to Lien, do I? No. That's me. Lien's presentation is a different one. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
There we go. Would you like to
Okay.
have the clicker?
Thank you, Matthew. Good morning, audience. May I introduce myself? My name Lin Suharni. Yeah, we call it Lin. We are going to sharing how we conduct the statistical business register in BPS Indonesia. Before that, my task is head of subdirectorate of standardization and classification of development statistics, and then also in charge in Secretariat SBR Indonesia, BPS Indonesia. I'm only delivering, I think this delivering our experience, and we need back input in order to better forward to BPS next. And many thanks for my team, SBR team, you help me to the completion of paper. This is namely of paper, SBR BPS Statistic Indonesia data maintenance strategy during and post 2016 economic census. I think I introduced BPS. BPS is a non-ministerial government institution in Indonesia, which is directly responsible to President. One of the BPS mission is to provide quality statistical data through an integrated statistic, by implementing national and international standard. If you know, in 2013, BPS has started to develop SBR to address the data quality issues. But until now, we don't have unit to the coordinate. Until now, we don't have unit self to maintain, and then me from standardization and classification added tasks about this SBR. Yeah. BPS start. What is SBR? SBR, I think, it is a unified and integrated list of businesses. As a statistical infrastructure, SBR has important and fundamental role in information and maintenance of integrated economic statistical information system that serve a variety of purposes. This is, why BPS Indonesia need SBR. Because SBR can produce, can reduce duplication and omission of activities. If you know, BPS, Indonesia has a big people. We have a big number of enterprise. We must be collect. We must be know how the indicator. We create more indicator to know how the economic disconduct. It is the problem. duplication or omission of activities. Why we need SBR? Is because SBR can enable the practical application of standard statistical unit and their classification. And then SBR is more efficient for a single organization unit to maintain the SBR as a source of frame. This is we need SBR. So we need how to maintain a strategy. It is important, I think. My experience, 3 years to handle the SBR, it is very, I think this, many more tasks, many more obstacles, I think, and because sometimes we must be we must be tasked about this classification, you think, and then sometimes we must be the task of about this SBR. And then until now, we need how to maintain strategy. Why we need maintenance strategy? To strengthen, to coverage and content of the SBR, also to keep it alive and up to date, and SBR is needed. Yeah. Good strategy to be learned from the best practical other more developed countries with acculturation adapted to current condition and characteristic of the Indonesia country. BPS until now is still working on the SBR development until now, yeah. This is, I think this share about this strategy. Strategy is 2 steps. I think the strategy during the economic census 2016 was implemented, and then after that, after economic census, what we do, and then this is the paper I want to sharing all audience. This is the strategy, yeah, during the economic census. The first. You know, economic census is special type survey is around the statistic office. The same of BPS. I think BPS is Indonesia. I think this the same. Economic census is famous. Yeah, until now was done. Yeah. Currently, BPS economic census was and still being done. In 2016, population listing was done, and August until September in year 2017, a complete enumeration of large, medium-sized businesses will be done, and micro businesses will be sampled. Census is very powerful, you know, it's a way to describe the real situation, but census, it is a drawback, yeah. More budget, more effort, the enumerator, yeah. My experience is, I experienced about this, how to conduct the census last year. We prepare and need enumerator until 320,000 enumerator. Yes. The other hand, administrative data for the ministries, institution, agencies is waiting to be used and analyzed, but it needs weaknesses. This is strategy. The first, based the SBR design on international standard and guideline. Yeah, I think this important. If we not know how to design SBR to the inline international standard, we maybe it's not the result is not more error or more need time, yeah. This is making a formal commitment to follow the general approach recommended in SNR, the first SNR 2008, International Standard Industrial Classification and Economic Activities, ICREF 4, the third International Business Register Guideline, the fourth guideline for building statistical register in Africa, and etc. It is the best design. Yeah. The second, the strategy ensuring coverage, content, and access is referring to guideline. It is important. Why? Because it is the fundamental. Yeah, in this the fundamental. The picture describe how about this the separate of the formal sector and informal sector. In SBR, we conduct the formal sector. Yeah, this is consists of final corporation, non-financial corporation, government, non-profit institution, service, household, and household with registered businesses. Yeah, and the red, yeah, now is the cover of SBR. It is the content from the area frame, informal sector. The third, we conduct the strategy about the confirming SBR data confirming with economic census 2016. SBR data is used to produce pre-filled form and list frame on the economic census 2016. And 2016 economic census is used a vehicle to confirming the SBR unit exists the field, has complete, accurate, and up-to-date the information. 2016 economic census results are expected as the new SBR data for long-term maintenance using administrative data. This is the picture we we produce the pre-filled form. Yeah, the economic census in Indonesia consists of two form from SBR. Called is L1P, and form from ground check L1. And then from SBR we produce the pre-filled and the check from enumerator. And then after that, we doing administrative data. Why? We must be prepared. We must be prepared if after the economic census, what is we done? What is, yeah, it is, we must be short of potential sources, yeah, short is potential sources. The use of administrative data on SBR expected to improve the quality of the frame because it's provide a complete coverage, unit, timeline, and accurate data due to the administrative process requirement. It also can reduce respondent burden and make the using of information possible. The other advantage is that it's safe resources use and compared to census and survey. There are, I think this only only the short list against it, only the not every the ministry, only 12, yeah, in 2016. Maybe until 38 agencies, yeah, we conduct the in Indonesia, yeah. If only separate, I think, consists of the investment coordinating board, social security for employment, Indonesian Central Bank, until Financial Service Authority. What is the finding? The finding, there is no agency responsible for single registration of all businesses in Indonesia. And then we find about this Digitex has brought this coverage, sufficient content to support SBR need and centralized database. Also, there is no single ID mechanism for businesses in Indonesia. This is I want to share how the SBR strategy post-economic census will be prepared. This is, I want to define the formal sector to be coincident with SBR coverage. We identified, the SBR coverage and what is the formal sector. And then this figure show its identification of the coverage. The column sector divided to rows, formal sector and informal sector, and then from the other column, this type of businesses consists of large, complex, and or influential, large, medium, and small. And then if large, complex, and influential, we need profiling, we need task deeply, And then for type of large, medium, and small, you can data from the register in administrative data. And informal sector, we not as covered in SBR, covered to the census block. The second, review SBR content and term identification, economic, demographic, and leakage variable. I think this is very important. What is general characteristic? General characteristic census identification is structure, contact, address, the link between unit, and then revenue, total wages, total workers. After that, we load from economic census, we load data in SBR from economic census, from list from prefield, list L1 and L1P, we load data from economic census, especially information about this, the 48, 14A, 15A, B, 19, 23. The fourth, the load data from directors maintained by subject matter area. It is maybe is important. This one. Why? Because BPS has 17 subject matter area, the conduct of the directories. This is the fifth. Extend the current 4-tier statistical unit model to the comprehensive unit model. As you know, if this is important, we identification from the field, the row, the first column, it is from businesses. After that, we coordinate and we must be concordance, to organizational BPS unit, and then after that we must be linked to administrative data. Then after that we must be profiling, and then after that we have result about the sampling unit and survey. Yeah, this is, we use administrative data. The sixth, they use administrative data as the principal source of SBR maintained. Yeah, from the guideline, we must be separate what is primary administrative data, what is secondary administrative data sources. Primary administrative data sources, we can add, birth, and update content, and the secondary administrative data cannot add, birth, and update, only update content. Yeah, yeah. This is SBR updating coverage and content. We has yeah, the map. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This document and analyze administrative data sources of potential use in SBR creation and maintenance. Yeah. Besides, we must be conduct the methodology, and we must be prepared of the system. What is the system? Yeah, system disparate of formal sector, informal sector, and then what is the separate the task of the system? If we large and complex and influential, we must be can check use a signal, must be can check no, must be can check. What is the information? Yeah. The eighth, the load data from administrative data sources. This is important after the economic census. Yeah. And then analyze the coverage content and access of BKPM data as prototype. As you know, is in according the administrative data, study administrative data, we find out about this digitext. It is more broad list of information, but until now, BPS not have a MOU to digitext. I think, yeah. Currently, loading administrative data from Digitech not yet implemented because still needs strong collaboration with chief statistician and ministers of finance. Yeah, because according to the law, yeah, BPS cannot get a data from Digitex until have accepted from Ministry of Finance. We choose BKPM as prototype. Why? Because the data are in principle available, because it will be a testing ground to establishing data transfer protocol, and then because it might help in dealing with the supervision that BPS senior management currently has about the use of administrative data. Yeah, but it's opportunity. Yeah, opportunity. What is the opportunity? We analyze the coverage of BKPM data, determine to what extent BKPM data include the businesses in the current subject matter area directories, build and test the procedure and system for automatic updating of the SBR from administrative source, and develop the case for access to data, to text data as more comprehensive source. Yeah, this is 10, define step of strategy load data BKPM, I think. And finally, we must be define and introduce a senior management directive. Yeah, okay. Yeah, this is conclusion, I think. Yeah, okay, this is conclusion. As a statistical infrastructure, SBR has important and fundamental role in the formation and maintenance of integrated economic statistical information system that serve in various purposes. Outcome of impact BPS business process to SBR. One is transform the business directors updating management from industrial basis to central integrated basis for efficiency, better quality, and coordination. It is, I think, this more high. Yeah. The second, common master frame based on SBR4 survey frame, which SMA use and give feedback to SBR update. The third, impact to BPS, involve cooperation BPS with line ministries to support SBR through administrative data. And then, until now, economic census and statistical business register actually could support each other. And economic census to collect data from statistical unit, the target population, I think the also used in BPS until now. Maybe is if SBR is settled, census must be need, but not all the cover. Maybe it's separate cover. If we need a separate cover, why? In SBR this settle, we conduct of the formal sector, maybe it's next the economic census, only the cover of informal sector. Yeah. SBR updating strategies are expected to be able to synergize the data source that are on, as well as initiate another data source for maintaining continuity of data after economic census. A maintenance strategy should be articulated and implemented to ensure resources are used effectively. The amount of the maintained effort devoted to an enterprise should be in accordance with its size and potential impact upon published statistics. It should take into account to its propensity to the change and source of updating information. Yeah. Okay. And then it was realized toward the ideal as above need to be appropriate means to order to regulate the management of the man, money, and material effectively and efficiently as possible to get maximum result with minimal effort. A good strategy to be learned from the best practical other more developed countries with acculturation adapted to current condition and characteristic of Indonesia countries. Maybe it's finished. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lian. I think give a very good picture of the work which has been done here. And now I have to go back to the other presentation, my first presentation, if we can get that on the screen. Yes, where I want to talk about I have to talk about the papers from Mongolia and India. First, I'd like to say a little bit about Mr. Oyunbaleg's paper. As I said, it's really the story of the development of the SBR. These papers are all on the conference website, by the way. So I would urge you to download them and have a look at them, because I think that they're informative and valuable to look at. And so first he talks about the purpose of the SBR. And then he starts talking about it, the structure and the nature. So the data sources which is used, and then the structure, with the fields and things like this. And then he goes into telling the story a bit about the development. About how they managed to develop the business register under this, what he calls the Monstat project, which from its title, I guess, it sounds like it's one of the World Bank World Bank StatCap projects, actually. And he says about the activities to date. And then he has a little section on the challenges and the future needs. What he thinks the SBR is needed from the SBR in the future, and what the challenges which they faced. A few things sort of came out for me in reading this paper. One was the very strong links and the heavy reliance they've had to place on the economic census, precisely because they found quite a lot of difficulty in Mongolia in accessing the administrative data. The other thing which struck me, and maybe it's partly because this particular group of papers are a lot of them focusing on development of SBRs, but it would have been nice to hear more from the Mongolia paper about how the SBR has been used. Because I said it's been developed, it is in development, but this project has been going on for quite a while now. And it would be nice to say whether this business register had actually been used to draw frames for any surveys or to develop statistical publications. So that's the Mongolia paper. It's quite a short and concise paper. The India paper is much longer and more complete, and that's in a way fitting just because of the scale of the exercise. In some ways it has quite a similar structure. It talks, except that it first starts talking about the place of statistics and the place of business registers in a federal India, and it very much emphasizes the special issues that come with working in a federal country, so it's. And there's some of the same issues that, for instance, in a UK context, you'd be thinking of Germany and the way that the German federal statistics system has to work. But it's got and this comes that it's the splits of responsibilities among the states, the splits of responsibilities among a lot of different organizations who are all responsible for working with businesses at the all India level, at the state level, and also sometimes at the district level as well. Their work has been, their recent task has been to unify these efforts and try to bring them all together and to get to produce a unified register for the whole of India. And so it talks about that a bit at the beginning. It talks about the benefits of an SBR, of course, and the data sources, and the creation process. He does talk a little about the uses here, which I found, I liked this bit about the paper, especially because I don't think I'll say later, I don't think we talk enough about, when we're discussing business registers, about how to use them, how we ought to use them, and how to maintain them. And again, the challenges for the future. So I just thought I'd share some bits from this paper, because I found that this was quite in some ways, it was like you could make a film of this, or a novel. It's a heroic exercise. And it should just give you some idea of all the different acts and boards which they had to cope with in order to collect their register. There's a Companies Act for all companies, a Factories Act for all factories greater than 10 workers, on any day of the last 12 months. This is actually just the ones with power. If they don't have power, if the factories don't have power, it's greater than 20 workers. But you can imagine for the whole of India how many factories there are, people making something who have who have employed more than 10 workers at any time in the last 12 months. There's an act for registering all the shops and commercial establishments. There's an act for registering all the societies and the NGOs. There's an act for registering all the cooperative societies. There's an act at the district level, at the village level. They have to, there are these cadis which have to register, sorry, cadi, I think you'll correct me, but I think they are small, informal businesses. And these are supposed to be registered at the village level. And at the district level, you have a directorate of industries who are registering the industrial units and the industrial firms. So you've got all these different people with responsibilities for registration. And so they had to go through this incredible procedure where, I haven't put it on the slide, but I'll quote it. Into this work which they've done, this job which they've done, they had 1.17 million enumerators and supervisors participating in this. 1.17 million people working on this. And so for every district, every state, they've had to identify all the registering authorities in that state. So they started really just by a survey of the districts and the states to say who registers businesses in your place. They've collected these things and they've then had to translate a lot of them into English. So a lot of these records are paper. A lot of them date back for years. You can imagine these people going in and opening up these dusty rooms and finding piles of paper, which they then had to take and translate into English and transcribe and capture on a computer. And then when they've done all that, they have had to make comparisons using the administrative areas. So taking the smallest administrative areas for all the different registers and making comparisons at that level. Now, they don't say much. You'll hear this afternoon about how difficult it is to make comparisons of when you don't have common numbers and how hard it is to do that and some of the techniques for doing it. But and it truly is a heroic job. I keep coming back to that to do this for the whole of India. And so they were doing, and then when they've done that, then they went to the field to try and verify the enterprises and the establishment's details in the field. That was when they started to do their field work. And throughout all this, there was like a quality assurance, a checking procedure. For each state, rather, at least one completed district's register was sent to the CSO. They sent an Excel summary, and then they developed just a VBA and Excel routines to run on this to do the data checking. And then they could assign unique identification numbers. And what is also interesting is quite how relatively recent this is, because we think of India as a country which is a very sophisticated statistical country, with a country with a relatively sophisticated statistical system. But this SBR development is something which they've unified SBR development is something which they've just embarked on since, I think, as far as I could work out from the paper, it's really something that they've been doing since 2011, developing since 2011. So after they've assigned the unique units, then they prepare the live register, and then they have a stage which they call annual addition and deletion of enterprises. But there's less detail about how that happens. And yeah, so what struck me about this was just the huge, heroic effort, the scale, the level of the number of processes which had to be gone through, the number of places they had to be done, throughout the paper, you can see the not quite complaints, but points made about how they'd had to deal with with paper registers, how often they found the data provided by the authorities was incomplete. The data was in hard format. It was in local languages. And as I said, this is quite recent that they've done this. The sheer number of stakeholders and players involved in this exercise. Again, that was it was not quite mind-boggling, but certainly very, very impressive. And then this is a quote from the paper, where after you've seen all this work, all this effort, all this work by over 1 million people, then the killer quote, which is, annual updation exercise is a bigger challenge. That is someone who to and also, it's slightly plaintive, international agencies may support Indian states, which I understand is actually quite unusual for India to ask for international assistance for things. So that was what. So yeah, I urge you to read the paper, if only for just for the drama of it. So what looking at all of the three papers together, and also the other papers which we're looking at today, that several things struck me. One is just the huge size of the exercises which we're dealing with here. And I was just making a comparison, Googling between our business register and the UK. And I'm afraid these statistics are Google statistics, so these are approximations, but they're not way off. And well, I say they're Google statistics, the Indian and Indonesian ones come from the paper. But 59 million businesses in India, 27 million businesses in Indonesia, and you compare that with the UK Interdepartmental Business Register, where only 2.6. And so, it's not just the size of the country. I think if you make rough comparisons with the populations, you'll see that in countries in this region, there are more businesses, there are less people per business, or more businesses per capita, is the other way around, in Asia than there are in, certainly in the UK. Apart from Mongolia here, is slightly an outlier. So there are, what we're trying to do, or what you're trying to do with the business registers here is a much bigger task, just in sheer numbers of businesses to calculate, than the one that we're faced with in the Europe and the OECD countries. And at the same time, at the center of the office, there may be millions of people collectors spread across the country, but the teams at the center, just by eyeball, they seem sometimes a little bit smaller than the teams at the center in the ONS handling business registers. And so that there was that was one thing that struck me. There's a lot of commonality in the uses. And there were, I've paraphrased the lists of the uses for which were given in the Mongolian and Indian papers. I didn't lift the one from the Indonesian paper, but I think it wasn't set out in a list in quite this way, so it wasn't quite as easy to steal. But I think it's a fairly similar thing. You're looking at a directory for mailing lists, a sample frame, a basis for grossing up. You're trying to prevent duplication so you don't all go to the same business twice. And you're trying to make coherence across the different surveys. So you're trying to, all trying to rationalize and integrate your statistics here. So the aim, the vision is the same across for a lot of these exercises. Although, again, it was interesting to me that they didn't talk directly about measuring change and the role of the business register in measuring economic changes. And for me, we're coming from a national accounts background in many ways. So, economic growth, economic change is the headline variable for economics for us. And the sort of the rule of thumb with national accounts is you're always thinking about the change, you're always optimizing for the change. And they say that the change, the growth rate for many countries' economic statistics, many countries' accounts, is measured, actually measured more accurately than the levels. And because that's the headline figure which people concentrate on. And so it would have been interesting to say to have more emphasis on this when you're thinking about business registers. Other themes which were the common sources. There's quite a lot of overlap between the different countries, between the sources which are used. Everybody uses economic census. Everybody's making some use of an economic census, which is this huge periodic exercise. And everybody is also trying to use administrative data and look at economic census and administrative data. But they use business registration data, but they find that is hard to clean and contains many dead companies. You know, many companies are registered, but are never actually, either they don't operate, they never operated, or they don't operate anymore. And then tax data, like with DG Tax in Indonesia, it's often very hard. It would be a great data source because you know they're there because they're paying tax, but it's often very hard to obtain. And the social, I was interested not as much as said about social security, because I would have thought that social security would often, it gives you the same thing that the tax records do, in that if they're paying social security, they must be existing. But it's just a little bit less locked and bolted, and so they're a little bit more approachable than the tax office. So, but the big thing which struck me with this administrative data, use of the administrative data, as talked about in most of these papers, is that the administrative, it's down to the statisticians to actually go and get this administrative data and to change it and to make it coherent with the business register and to bring it into the business register. So the work of translating the administrative data into the business register data is still falling to the statisticians. So the people generating the business register are not changing their systems. And so what that means is that the statisticians are still left with this huge task. So they're still left with this big effort they have to make to translate the administrative data and to move it into the business register. So, so that administrative data it offers the promise of easier access, of being easier than collecting to the field. But in fact, there is an enormous amount of work involved in collecting administrative data and making it fit for statistical purposes. There's a specific point struck me about the Indonesia paper as well. I just had a question, maybe for Bulien, about that, was this relationship between administrative data and the maintenance of the register, which is enormously important, I think. And whether she is saying that the maintenance is going to be based on a relatively small number, on the administrative data. And the idea is that over time, as the administrative data flows in, eventually these administrative database sources will make up the bulk of the register. So I was wondered if she could say something about, given that that's the target, that's where you're going to get in the long run, what are you then going to do with the other records, the records which were there in the census, but they're not covered in the administrative data sources. So I wondered if that was, maybe later she could say something about that. Because I think that these issues of maintenance are absolutely key for having a working economic register, a working business register. And I actually put this on the slide just to remind ourselves. And the reason is that without the maintenance, it's only the maintenance that allows you to have to actually use this register to measure the changes which you want to measure. Because if you don't have the updates, you get a bias in your change measure. Because I sort of wrote this down just to clarify it for myself, but also I hope it will be useful for you as well, that if you're trying to measure the change between two periods, so you've got in the base period, you've got some activities which are going on in both periods, where you've got enterprises which are there in both periods, you've got the activities are being undertaken in both periods. You've got some activities where the enterprises, some enterprises which are there in both periods, but the product that they're producing, the activity they're doing is only there, is something they do in the first period, and they stopped it by the second period. You've got some enterprises that are there in both periods, and the products that are, by the second period, they're doing new things. But then you've got some enterprises which are there in the first period, but by the time you come to the second period, so they're there in the base, but by the time you come to the second period, they've closed down. They're not there anymore. And all of these you can pick up in a sample or a survey which you select in the base period. So you can produce an estimate for these things because they're there, at least you've got the enterprises or the establishments, depending on how you do your register, there at the beginning. And so you can select a sample and you can follow them. What you can't select, what won't be in that sample is the enterprises which are born. So the enterprises which are not there in the base period, but they are there in the current period. So you won't have those in your sample, and so you won't have those in your measure if you just rely on a sample from the register in your base period. And so what this means, you just have if you just rely on following some enterprises or companies which you've selected in your base period, you'll be missing some of the output which you should be measuring, some of the activity which you should be measuring. And you may think, well, this is not going to be very big, this is going to be quite small. is not going to be an important effect. But then you think of all the different ways. I mean, again, in the UK, the average lifetime of a small business is, I think, 3 years. For small businesses, there's quite a lot of churn. And you get the ones which die because you're following those ones. Without a regular way of updating your register, you're not going to get the ones which are born. And this is not just small businesses which are being born, it's new foreign businesses coming into the country and setting up enterprises. And these days, you will often find that every time they decide to do something new, a business sets up, well, this is in the UK, when I was working as a price statistician, researching prices in the UK, I said, let's look at the, we want to start using the business register to collect as a tool for collecting prices, helping us improve our price collection. Let's look at Tesco, it's a big supermarket, and we found it's between 90 and 100 different enterprises on the business register for this one large business in the UK. And that's because, and so more and more and more businesses are setting up new formal organizations every time they want to do something new. And so if you don't capture these, you're missing out a lot of the current growth, and you're missing out a lot of the current growth. And even if this is just, even if this amount, these new enterprises were only 5% of the total activity in any period, 5% is a small difference in a level, but 5 percentage points is an enormous difference in a growth rate. And so these sort of biases are serious, and they are real. And the only way you've got to avoid them is to actually get really frequent updates of your business register. I think administrative data is the only mechanism for doing that. So my sort of takeaways from the session, I think we've got at least 15 minutes for...
We've got about 10 minutes before we break for coffee.
Sorry,
and it would be good to have some questions in the room, so we might want to quickly...
Yes. There's an enormous amount of work being done in the region to set up the SBRs. I think perhaps in the SBR work you need to give more attention to how to maintain and use these SBRs as well as set them up. I think the key criteria in designing the SBRs ought to be updatability. That's got to be, it's not what can I capture once, but what can I maintain and update regularly. And the other thought was, this was, again, in the UK, we call our business register the interdepartmental business register, because the idea is that this is not just something for the statisticians, but it's a common tool for all departments. And so all departments have a stake in maintaining it. And I think in order to maintain, to get the good flows of administrative data, statisticians cannot do it alone. They need the people operating these administrative systems to develop and change their systems as well. So, thank you. And can I call for questions now? So we have 10 minutes. Could we maybe have 15 minutes? Do you think that'll give us a little bit longer?
All right, I'll be kind.
Thank you. Do we have any questions here? Yeah.
Thank you. You mentioned in your presentation that there is a lack of a unique business identifier, and I can see how that would pose tremendous challenge to developing and maintaining the SBR. I'd like to know whether Indonesia has any plans to introduce a unique business identifier. That's the question, and maybe I will take this opportunity to share a reflection. So we know that besides official data sources, administrative data are increasingly important for updating of the SBR, and we do need the support and help of our colleagues who are maintaining this business, this administrative data records. I'm also wondering whether will there be a need, therefore, to also have some sort of understanding with these providers that when they do change their system, they should also consider the statistical needs of the NSOs, and whether there could be a more structured way to ensure that the needs of both parties are met. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Ha, come from Vietnam. I have two questions to Ms. Lien. The first, you say your SBR systems do not cover informal sector. So I think that it should cover the informal sector because the function of the SBR is makes a simple frame. If we not available the informal sector, it's difficult to support the house, business household survey. Yeah. So for the second question, I see the data source is the the administrative data source is gets from the many ministry. It's 9 ministry. It's very difficult to integrate data or mapping. I would like to know what information you use to as linkage record to integrate data. And one recommend, because the administrative data is available in the ministry, so you get to many ministry, the data collection is very important to improve the data quality control. So the data collection, it should be online and automatically. Thank you.
Yeah, myself. May I? Yeah. It's not a question, it's adding up to what you said for the Indian perspective, that the business register. We at the India level have 36 states and UTs and 646 districts. So the data integration is a huge task. In your presentation, you have already also clarified that there should be updation. For the updation, but my just apprehension is that when there is no base, how you can update? Once you have to build a base, that is the first step, that the basic data or the benchmarking of all the business identities has to be established at first. Then you can update. For the national counts perspective, you are right that we go for the economic values of whatever the fields are there in any of the state or the country. So and you already summarized Indian perspective that it's a huge task. Only for if you have listed 7 acts, this is only for the 7 acts. Whatever the Mr. Malik, SC Malik, which have written this paper, have already summarized these things for the 7 acts. There are numerous number of acts which are registering the enterprises or the identities or the establishments in the country for doing any type of just businesses. Once these businesses get reflected into a base period, then the updation can go ahead. This is my, what you call, suggestion, that once we should benchmarking all the SBR, and since it is also correlated to the economic census, all the countries are doing the economic census. In economic census, the registered as well as the non-registered identities are to be, establishment are to be captured. But for the business register, you have go to firstly for the administrative record, get the administrative record and translate it into yourselves in the business registers, what you call system, then you can have a good benchmarking, and further that you can update these things. This is my apprehension, that we'll have to first go for a benchmarking.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I want to try to answer. Yeah, the first, how about this in in Indonesia don't has identification number. What is maintaining the SBR? Next. Yes, it is the big problem, I think, in Indonesia. As you know, is many ministries has allows and then conduct the yeah, and BPS. This is challenge in BPS. We must be has a negotiation and then socialization to another ministries, how the important we have an one identifying number. It is important. Until now, BPS has influence to another ministry, especially to the Ministry of the Plan, and then after that, BPS has answer. Yeah, until now is from government is thinking about this, and after that, until now, we don't know what is the progress. Yeah, maybe it's the first question, and the second about this the informal sector. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, informal sector is not covered in SBR. Yes, as you know, is if we cover informal sector is very big the number of the enterprise. It is not efficient. Why? Because in Indonesia, number of enterprise or establishment from informal sector until 90 or 97% the activities, but not has a distribution of the values or share of GDP. Yeah. I think this the SBR not cover all, but is only separate, has a big output, yeah, big of share of the GDP. It is the strategy, only strategy. Yeah. Why? Yeah, I think this. Besides it, the maintaining of the large and small, large medium enterprise, it is not. It is high. Maybe obstacle, because until now we have a survey is called a large medium industry sector. Until now, the progress of the survey not deeply. Non-response is very high. Yeah, it is very. It is important. And SBR, I think this the strategy to the improve survey until now and integrate the first time, and after that, we cover maybe they cover only large, medium, not informal sector. Informal sector, I think, need us must be need census, yeah, because every day birth of the informal sector, yeah, and then not efficient with if we cover in SBR, yeah, okay. What is the cover in household survey? Yeah, maybe, yeah. Informal sector cover in household survey. Yeah, yeah. Okay. The third about is information of linking and what is recommended about the quality control, and it is automatically of administrative data. Yeah, I think this is the question, and my answer is yeah. The challenge next maybe is mentioned before. BPS until now is have MOU from administrative data, from OJK, from BKPM. That not micro data transfer from OJK or BKPM to BPS. Yeah. SBR, the first unit, I think it's the first team to the excellent to be deliver data and get data micro from administrative data to SBR. Maybe I think is the hope is automatically making a database. Yeah, maybe is this month we have agenda to with BKPM, and then we team BPS and team BKPM attending, and then we have the agenda how to transfer the data, micro data. Every 3 months, I think every 3 months BPS can get the data from BKPM automatically. Use APA, yeah. Maybe it's the team from SBR system can describe how about the APA, yeah. Next, yeah. Okay, this is I think this is automatically. Yes, I think we hope the automatically, yeah. What this is, yeah, what is BPS has not identification number, yeah. We need matching, but not matching manual, with matching automatic from system, yeah. Yeah, if we the match, yeah, if 3 condition, I think this the strategy is I've developed before. If we match the administrative data with link SBR, if not match, yeah, from SBR, we get data from administrative data, yeah, we add information of new birth. If not match, yeah, not match, we can check from survey to field. I think need of collaboration from BPS and from administrative data. As you know, administrative data line ministry has not survey. This I think this a bargaining position from BPS, because BPS has enumerator. Yeah, what this thing the next, what the efficiently of enumerator. I think this is important. Yeah, thank you.
I know we have more questions here in the room, but I'm aware that the coffee is calling us. So I think if you are okay, maybe we can try and cover those in the discussion outside as well. And I'd just like to close by thanking Bulien and all the authors, even the ones who are not here, to thank them for their papers and their fine presentations here today. So thank you again.
Okay.
Thank you, Matthew Powell and Leanne Zuhani. Can we please have everyone back here by 10:50? So we still have 15 minutes, and we will have more time for questions. Jonathan, I promise we will get to you later today. Thank you. Hello everyone. I think we're starting to get everyone back in here. So welcome back from the break. We're now going to start on session 2, which is focusing on administrative data. Matthew Shearing, who is sitting up front there, will be chair, and we have papers from Zhu Ting and Saeed Fayez. Matthew Shearing is based in Jakarta as a senior consultant with Oxford Policy Management and the development of official statistics systems. He previously worked for the Office of National Statistics, the ONS, for 16 years, including managing the office of the UK Chief Statistician and as the head of international cooperation. So he's clearly experienced in dealing with these sort of problems. As such, I'd like to welcome him to start.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you for inviting me here. It's an honour to chair this session. It's even a bigger honour because I have a confession to make. I'm not an expert in statistical business registers, and I'm not actually a statistician. So thank you for having me. My experience really, as outlined by Michael, is really about thinking about the big picture and looking at the strategic level across national statistical systems. And I think this is a very important topic for the statistical business registers, particularly when we're looking at the use of administrative data. The technical aspects of using administrative data, of course, are very important, and we can talk more about those. But without taking a look at the strategic challenges, I'm afraid all the technical work will go to waste. And the challenges there are not just about how we deal with the external world, government agencies, politics, etc. They're cross-cutting the NSOs themselves. They're not just about statistical business register units. This is a very wide strategy that we need to think about and develop. So what I hope to do today, one of the main objectives, is to have a discussion which kind of synergizes a strategic view of what we need to do to use administrative data, or to obtain administrative data, and then use it effectively in the SBRs. So, very usefully, we have 3 very good papers as background to this discussion. The first 2 you see on the screen there will be presented today by my colleague Saeed from the Iranian NSO and my other colleague Zhu Ting from the MBS in China. The third paper, unfortunately, the authors cannot be with us today, and I'll attempt to just summarize what was in that paper, but actually our colleague from BPS, Bu Lin, actually summarized quite well what was already in there. Usefully, one of the main good things about these papers is they talk about the non-technical aspects and how they're important and how we can deal with them. And what I'd like today's session to be about is really making sure that we share our experiences in our own NSOs about how we tackle these wider challenges. Thank you. So, in order to facilitate this discussion, I've tried to come up with a kind of a map of all of the big challenges we're facing, and I've called it a strategic landscape here, but what you can see, this is only a model of what's going on. It's very complicated and it's very big, and there is a lot we need to think about. Now, my colleague Matthew Powell mentioned that there's a tremendous amount of work involved in NSOs dealing with administrative data that is not necessarily fit for purpose. However, if we think about this strategically, all of the things we need to do in all of these spheres will help decrease the amount of work and increase the quality of what we're doing in terms of statistical business registers. It's kind of a process, but it's kind of cyclical. You may think about starting looking at the picture on the political side. So on the left-hand side there, I've categorized an element of activity there, which is around politics, if you like. And first and foremost, we need to make sure we have ministerial support for getting administrative data. Without that, we're very unlikely to get it. One of the key things that ministerial support will do will allow us to develop the law. And when I say the law here, this is not just about the statistical law, and the statistical law can enable us to have access to administrative data in departments, but in actual fact, just having a law there doesn't make it happen, as we all know. So it'd be useful today to know about what else you've been doing to make sure that if a law does exist to allow you access to administrative data, how you implement that. But a statistics law can also do something very important, and that is allow trust to be developed in official statistics. So in terms of protecting the independence of the statistical office, ensuring the statistical office is doing the right thing in terms of confidentiality. And actually, you could see trust as, it's not on this map, but it's around it. It's the oil which makes this system work. And actually, the whole office, the whole statistical system needs to think about trust first and foremost to facilitate getting good at administrative data in the first place. But the law isn't just about those statistical laws that can help in those areas. There are laws which create registers in government departments, which we need to be interested in and influencing. And there are also laws which come along which we need to spot an opportunity to use. So in the UK recently, for instance, there is now what's called a digital economy bill going through the Parliament, which is really about open data, about creating access to the data held by government across society. So the UK Statistics Authority in the UK has seen this opportunity and is making sure that Parliament is creating alignment in that law, which says that when government agencies change their registration systems, they must consult the NSO on those changes. So we need to spot those opportunities. We also need to have the skills to influence what's going on in the legal legislative process. What's also important in that political sphere is this word NSDS, which is the National Strategy for Development of Statistics. That each country should have that or something equivalent, which pushes the statistical system in the right direction. Administrative data needs to be at the heart of that strategy, and those strategies should be approved by ministers, okay, to get them really, to get us able to really implement them. As we move along that process, we look at Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, which are not in the political zone specifically, need political support to actually work, okay? We then have something which I've called interinstitutional. Now, that really is about the working arrangements which NSOs set up to work with government agencies, to develop the data, to get the data, develop relationships, and to work on those things which dissect their agency and the NSO. So things like how we're doing the coding, how we're constructing databases, and we'll hear from Saeed later about ideas about how to work with agencies to create the right kind of databases. So cooperative arrangements can be informal, but they can also be formal. So we should think about things like the Canadian Bureau of Statistics embedded their own staff within their tax office in Canada to actually do the coding for the tax returns. So there is a whole array of things we can do in that area. On the technical side, all of these things there you'll be familiar with. We need to think about the statistical needs. The IT side, the ETL is the extract, transform and load system, but you can call it what you want, but this is the IT side of getting data and transferring it to your NSO. And then we'll talk more about this later today, I'm sure, the matching process, how we integrate this data, all those issues are very important. I'd just like to draw your attention to something which often may be forgotten about, and this is what I've called here the organizational issues. To some extent, this is about the functional design of your organizations, how you categorize the units, how you organize different units doing different things. But actually, to some extent, it's also about making sure that we work across these boundaries. So however your organization is structured, you probably have a unit which deals with the Statistical Business Register. LBU stands for Large Business Unit. So in some organizations, we have units which maintain relationships with the large businesses. You'll have an IT unit. You'll have subject matter areas and usually a methodology area. They all need to work together on this. There's something you may not be familiar with there called an acquisition unit or administrative data acquisition unit. Now, some organizations think about setting up a separate unit because there is a specific skill set which is required in terms of getting hold of administrative data and dealing with it. It could be that you embed those skills in the other business areas we've got there, but I'm talking here about knowledge about government bureaucracy, knowledge about government legislation, how to influence it. knowledge about how government departments are structured, how registers are formed, so subnational structures to government departments, etc. You also need good negotiation skills and good communication skills. And in this area, I don't mean to be offensive, but statisticians aren't necessarily traditionally very good at communication and negotiation. So in any organization, we need to think about how we upskill in those areas to facilitate getting good administrative data and using it. You could think about putting other skills in the acquisition unit. So some organizations look at people with skills in understanding the quality of administrative data, dealing with confidentiality issues, IT, etc. But the main thing is to think about that you need to have a unified strategy. You all need to be thinking in the same way and working together to make this work. There's also something there at the bottom I've called management leadership. And this really is about two things. I think we all know that you don't really get access to administrative data unless the people at the top of your organizations are having the right conversations with the right people, are doing the diplomacy at that very, very high level in terms of talking to ministries and the government in general. But also, it's very much about internal management, not just from the top, but all the way down. Because this is such a big mission to get administrative data and use it well, everybody needs to be on board. There needs to be commitment from all managers and pushing in the right direction. It's very important. And also the management needs to ensure that there is a joined up strategy across the business areas, but not also that, it needs to ensure that when we're thinking about the Statistical Business Register, that's also in the context of wider administrative data needs of the organisation. We need to have a joined up strategy. And that to me is probably the most important thing, that there needs to be a strategy. You cannot manage this complexity without having one, or just knowing, you're thinking you know all the answers to the technical solutions without having a strategy which thinks about these wider issues. Okay, so I'm just going to briefly go over why I think the papers you're going to hear about from my colleagues here are important in this context. So the paper from Saeed here from the Statistical Center of Iran talks about the use of data from the Customs Clearance Department, which uses a very wide variety, complex variety of sources and databases, different types of goods, different regional levels, etc., etc. Now, why I feel this is important, because it looks at some of the technical issues, like exploring how you modify the databases in the Stats Office and in the administrative data agencies. It proposes a structure for a database that you could use in that context, and looks at a conceptual model, because it is complex, so we need to think about how we model this in order to manage it. It also, quite importantly, underlines this non-technical work I was talking about, the high-level actions, high-level interactions and cooperation being key to developing a system. And importantly, you use the word sustainable, and I think that's an important word to focus on in terms of thinking strategically. We need to think forward very much. The second paper from MBS in China, my colleague Zhu Ting, this is very interesting indeed. There is a unique opportunity in China to do some very special things that I think most of us will be quite envious of in this room. But hopefully someday these things can be available to us all in different NSOs. So what usefully happens in this paper is the NBS set out the principles in which you can approach these opportunities. Again, the importance of the non-technical side, government leadership is required and commitment, and sets out some lessons for the sort of strategic planning I was talking about. But actually, most importantly, even with amazing developments that you might wish for, you're still going to have the same old challenges, okay? So the challenges we're talking about within this whole strategy, they're never going to go away. The third paper, which I'll say a bit more about, but actually my colleague Bu Lin from BPS talked a lot about what's been happening in this area in Indonesia. Importantly, it looks at how you might have a step-by-step process to approaching these issues. And one of the important things I haven't mentioned earlier is making sure that you identify the benefits to the data provider of you taking their data and using it. So when we're thinking about strategies, we need to think about the other people, the other stakeholders involved, how we sell this to them in terms of their interests. What also is important about this paper is it sets out that we need to make sure that we do a comprehensive evaluation of what's available and start prioritizing what's important. Also about building relationships. This is this communication issue I talked about before. And how we make the most if we haven't got the best. How we make the most from the second choice if the first choice data isn't available. So I'm just going to say a few words now about that Indonesia paper because the authors are not available here, unfortunately, to present it. So the key things here, although Bu Lin did talk about this in a bit more detail earlier, was the fact that they had an in-depth study, which is very important. And some of those steps which were mentioned earlier are important to reflect upon. So evaluating, documenting and analysing the potential sources, determining what could be a primary source, what could be a secondary source, and then negotiating the access to that resource, developing an interim plan about how you deal with the sources and how you're going to deal with the next, if you get access to the primary source. And also important to understand that you need to establish a memorandum of understanding, but it's a process. So your first memorandum of understanding is not necessarily your last. And a lot of the cases you have to build a certain level of understanding and look towards negotiating a more detailed agreement which allows you better and better access and cooperation with that department you're dealing with. So there are some of the key aspects which were involved in that evaluation, looking at coverage and content and access. And it's interesting to note, so if you can read this paper, I recommend you do, that you might have a similar source in your country which you can use as a secondary source at least, particularly in terms of timeliness if you don't yet have access to tax data. And it seems that across the world, tax data is the best primary source. So if you're talking about prioritizing your strategic interactions, it's often your tax department who need to be the focus of your activities. And again, good cooperation with all kinds of agencies and ministries is very crucial. You have to get out there, and you have to talk to people, you have to do the groundwork, you have to leave the office. Okay? So I'm now going to ask Saeed to present his paper, and then we'll move on to Jing afterwards.
Thank you, Matthew, for a very good introduction. And good morning, everyone. First of all, on the behalf of the Statistical Center of Iran, I thank you for ESCAP for all kinds of supports to be attended in this seminar. Which one should I? As we all know, SPRs include a different component containing manufacturing, mining, trade agencies, services, custom, and etc. And one of the important parts in the SPR is the customs. And I try to focusing on this important part and make a review and the role of customs in the SPRs and debate about challenges and solutions and sustainable point of view. And also there are a lot of processes in the customs contain imports, exports, clearance, swapping, a lot more. I'm going to introduce my structure of my paper. First, an introduction on the custom clearance sector, and then I explain about organizational structure of the customs administration. And next, I describe in procedures of and registrations in the customs. Then I study on the databases and the statistical survey structure in NSO of Iran. And finally, a sustainability review on the clearance and conclusion have been made. Customs administration Iran have a different parts in the all the towns and especially in Tehran, and There are 8 branches and executive customs in Tehran. Also, the 8 supervising branches in different parts of the country, Tehran, customs and international airport that are very important, and most of goods that import from the airways from international airport of Tehran. Briefly, custom clearance procedures, as shown in the figure, have different steps. The first one is completing and presenting online declaration. And after declaration, except the necessary documents should be provided for the custom offices. And then after that, a sort of controlling for documents have been made. Another step is the payment of the customs. And finally, the goods can be released. I provide 6 important parts that a person or entities who want to clearance the goods and merchandise should be done. As you see in the steps diagram, in each step there are some important variables and keys that needs to provide by the importer. For example, in step 1, a shipment at customs. In step 2, import declarations, filling the import declaration, handwriting and electronic, typing the declaration, attaching documents to the declaration, and getting its sales are very important. In the step 3, that controlling and confirmation of the document, a unique code has been attached to the document for the importer. In step 4, and the evaluation process should be done and conducted by the customs officer. This step includes observation of goods, endorsement of declaration, reviewing all documents and tariffs, controlling of calculation, compiling of documents with custom regulations and trade rules, reporting and the selling of the shipment, and signing the of declaration by the importer. In the step 5, import declaration is needed, and commercial ID card for person or legal entities, warehouse receipt, bill of landing, certificate of origin, invoice, foreign exchange statement, and the other necessary parts should be done. In the final step, the importer can bring the important product out of the customs after an officer at the exit confirm that all documents are valid. So if you focus on the highlighted parts, you can find the different variables and different variables of the customs of goods should be registered in the process of clearance part. I provide a picture and show the both internal customs computerized network in the middle side, and the other backup servers in the other administratives to control. For example, if you see the internal databases like coding system, geodetical system, transit system, remote declaration, transportation, and all of these are work together and in combination with them, customs administration can provide necessary documents and data for own purposes. But this system and these databases use only for targets of the administration. In the backup side, you can find National Organization for Civil Registrations. This one is controlling for identity of a people. Imported card databases, Chamber of Commerce for a smart card controlling. As you see, this system can be worked with the other administrations, and in the other figure I put separation between different databases. For example, if the administration wants to provide any statistics, it can be focused on just one databases or any combination of these databases with the backup databases. But the important factor is all the statistics should be in the shadow of statistical register legislations. I mean that all databases should have an identifiers code, a unique code, and necessary numeric variables to join and provide the statistic not only for customs administration, but also for other statistical purposes. As shown in the figure, one of the databases is an automated system for custom data. In the middle and the right one in the bottom. This, called ESCAP in abbreviation, is a computerized custom management system which covers most foreign trade procedures. Also, the ESCAP software has been used in the Iran Customs Administration. ESCAP takes into account the international code and standards for all goods and merchandise that imported Iran, developed by International Organization for Standardization, ISO, WCO, World Customs Organization, and the United Nations. Also, ESCAP provides for electronic data interchange between the traders and customs using electronic data interchange for administration, commerce, and transport. We conduct a survey in the NSO of Iran every 4 years, and we obtain the statistical frame offline from the custom administration. Our questionnaire is looking for different parts from general information of the enterprises, expenditures and payment, incomes details, and investment, ICT, and responder attributes. In the bottom figure, you can find the different numbers of the framework. You can see an increase in the number of the enterprises in the framework. This is not just by increasing exactly, maybe some of enterprises have no identifier or so in this picture, I figure out how can the Statistical Center of Iran provide a framework for its survey. In the right side, you can the different databases: ESCAP, coding system, transit system, judicial, And the left side, the other supplementary databases like civil registration, post company, that provide NSO a statistical frame for conducting this service. This service is a full enumeration and in conduct every 4 years. But we have faced a lot of challenges when we receive an offline framework from customs administration. The major one is classified here, like the important one is lack of national ID. The variable of a national ID for persons who decided to carry goods in the databases of the customs. In Iran, national ID is a 10-digit variable, but in their file that we receive, maybe we face with a person with a blank or national ID less than 10 digits. So it is very difficult to link between the peoples in the two databases. The other difficulties is separation between the owners and clearance. I mean that some person and enterprises import goods and the raw materials for their own consumption. And the main activity is not also the clearance. So the difference between this person and enterprises with those ones that the clearance is the main activity is very difficult because we have no same code or any variables to make this separation. The other important challenge is a lack of business unique code. To provide a linkage between the customs databases with the other databases, for example, in the manufacturing databases, we find in enterprises that produce, and we cannot provide an exact linkage between these enterprises in the manufacturing databases and custom databases. So in order to provide, in order to prevent any duplication, we need a business unique code, and we haven't. According to the structure of the variables and the different parts in the custom administrations, we propose the variables for administrative databases and that's shown in the graph by different share. For example, the mandatory variables should be 10% of the structure of variables. 70% of variables is administrative to provide administrative purposes and goals. And the other supplementary is 20%. In detail, in the table, you can find different variables in the different categories in rows, enterprises, legal entities, and real person. In the mandatory side, the all kind of digit variables for linkage to databases is necessary. In the enterprises, BIN is abbreviation for business identification number for enterprises. Postal code, IC code of main activity are very important and should be mandatory for all internal databases. For example, in the administrative side, name of business, activity status, active or inactive, name of premise owner, enterprise office address, enterprise office telephone number, number of employees, type of permit, number of permit, and etc. And the supplementary can be optional for each kind of databases. For example, inquiry details, annual turnover, production rate, and lots more. Also, we can provide a model. You can see in the picture. This shows briefly the process of the clearance. The start point is from the left one in the customs clearance, enterprise, or legal. The necessary and mandatory variables for each of them is business unique code and national ID number or national ID for legal entities. These are mandatory. They fill the online declaration form and declaration number allocate to them. And the other steps in the process needs to banking and guarantee controlling and judicial controlling and all of them. And in the bottom, you can see other administrative can use this business unit code and national ID number as a linkage code for connecting to the SCI. And the three type of application here is provided for statistical purposes, for research and scientific development, and national planning. And for conclusion, sustainable process need to consider all parameters which provide both administrative and statistical goals simultaneously. This might include of re-engineering the processes, or modification or development these current processes, using confident data linkage methods, same definitions of variable or redefinitions if it is necessary. Define and provide some variables with some function in the different databases. The important one is the sustainable primary keys, the numeric or unique codes that are stable during the time, and promoting the infrastructure and making harmonization of database formats, online or connecting, offline connecting. And one of the important one is the reinforcement of the close collaboration and expert meeting of the different organizations to meet all steps. So the high level of interactions and controversial meetings, it is necessary for developing sustainable system. And using different decoding system can be beneficial also for better harmonization, for different elements in SPRs, and increase confidentiality. And again, thank you for all and for the attention.
Thank you, Saeed. Very interesting. Thank you so much. I'm now going to go straight to Zhu Ting for her presentation. And after her presentation, we will have time for an open discussion with questions. So I'll go straight to you, Zhu Ting. Thank you.
Well, many thanks to ESCAP for holding this event for us. I think it's excellent. And I also thank you for giving me this chance to give a presentation of my paper. Excuse me, my presentation. Okay. Okay, please. No, this is not my presentation. This is the wrong one. I'm sorry. Yeah, new achievements. 6. New achievements, yeah. Well, I'm Zhou Ting from Census Center, which is in charge of the management of China's SPR. And since the time is limited, I think I will give my presentation in a short way. Here's the outlines of my presentation. There are many 5 parts. First, I would like to tell the background information of our business register. China's SBR was first built in the year of 1996 and has been experiencing a fast development since 2009. It covers 2 kinds of statistical units, legal units, and their establishments. And we have 3 main ways to update China's SBR. One is economic census, which is conducted every 5 years, and regular statistical surveys. And another way is what we are talking about, administrative sources. Here's a figure that shows that what we do in census years. And so we cooperate with different kinds of administrative departments. They will send us all registration information before the census, and we will use this information to combine them into our system and for comparison and integration, then form a booklet of all the survey units. And after that, the enumerators will do the census field work, and after the census, we will form a database which is used to update our SBR. And in non-census years, we have our working mechanism with these different administrative authorities. They will give births, changes, and deaths information semi-annually, and we use this information to integrate them and use our SBR to compare and integrate the data. After that, we will verify this information through our regular surveys. When the outcome we will use them to update our SBR. And the second part is about one of the most important reforms that we have experienced these years, which is SCIC code. In the past, there are so many codes used in China, and there are typically 2 kinds. Original code, which is given when the enterprises get registered. And another is for management purpose for the administrative authorities, which is derivative code. And for SBR, we use most is the organization code because it has the most big coverage, and we use it for comparison and data matching. And when promoting this program, we have to think about the 3 questions. Why need to establish, and how does the program work, and what is principles? I think the first question is very obvious because we need the unified code for data matching and data sharing. And how does the program work? Newly established legal entities and other organizations will be coded when registered, and they do not need to apply for registration code and organizational code, respectively, like the past, but to apply once and unified code will be given. And here, I list 3 main principles for the code design, as compatible as possible for a lowest cost, use unified standards, and focus on the long run. And here's the figure showing the composition of SCIC. And we can see from the first digit, it is the registration department code, which tells the source of the data. And second digit is the institutional type code. It tells the information of the type unit type. And from 3rd to 8th, the code for administrative divisions where the registration departments locate. And from 9th to 17th digit is the identification code. And last digit is check digit. And SCIC has main 4 characteristics: uniqueness, compatibility, stability, and full coverage. Adaptations have been made to SBR since the program came out. The first step was to add a field for SCIC in the SBR, and the relative automatic checking rules were made in the system to ensure data quality. And we can see the benefits here. And also, there is the main problem, which is the duplicates. And the third party I want to introduce is the 5-in-1 registration reform, which is quite Chinese saying. In the past, entrepreneurs had to get registered in different administrative departments for different licenses and certificates to get started. Just like I listed below, you can see there are lots of certificates the enterprises have to get. And the reform aims to integrate these 5 different kind of licenses into one with SCIC code on it. And SAIC was responsible for the registration and managing work for the largest quantity of market players before the reform, and it plays a central role in promoting the reform. Data sharing work is centralized with SAIC and information exchanged on provincial level. And the information shared between SAIC and the statistical agencies, we can see there are main 4 types of information from SAIC, and we also offer them 16 data items of the statistical information, and this will be exchanged seasonally. And you can see the chart here. Well, SBI is not only gets a stable and abundant data source for maintenance, but also offers a platform for comparison and integration of statistics and administrative records in this reform. And lots of work have to be done. And you can see that we have to do a business plan, and we have to build a functional system for data receiving, storage, data standardization and analysis. And of course, SBR's operating strategy in using administrator should be also adjusted. And from this picture, we can see the new updating mode for SBR in utilizing administrative sources. And of course, we find problems in using administrative sources. The main problems are limited stable sources, limited information shared, low frequency of data sharing, and most important, we find that some data quality is not very good. And of course, we find difficulties in data integration. Although the SCIC code is it's come out, but we need time to promote it. So before that, we have difficulties. And of course, due to the low quality of some of the administrative departments, we find that maintenance strategy have difficulties. And the future plans, we will still work towards this 5-in-1 registration reform, and we also will promote cooperation with other administrative sources. Here I want to come to my conclusion. ISIC code is expected to greatly facilitate the matching and integration process. And there's still much work to do in promoting 5-in-1 registration reform in statistical agencies for better maintenance strategy of SBR. And the cooperation needs to be strengthened with relative administrative departments for the purpose of optimizing the work mechanism referring to data exchange methods, frequencies, contents, and standards, etc. Thank you.
We've got 14 minutes, but I will say I think at the end of the next session we will invite all the authors up again on the podium and have a longer question and answer session. So I'm sorry, authors, but you won't be done yet. You'll be called up again, sorry.
So we have more or less 15 minutes now. So what I'd like to do is, it's really useful actually to have an opportunity to come back to this discussion later. So I'd really like to do two things now in the next 15 minutes. Is if you do have any questions you have for the authors now, please ask them, but also think about the issues, and later on today you can ask them those questions. So there's another opportunity now to actually answer the questions I raised earlier, and really it'd be very useful if we could share experiences in this room about how we have faced some of the other challenges which I mentioned. Do I have my presentation? Yeah. Okay, so to facilitate that discussion, I'd like to just put that diagram up again to get us thinking about the bigger picture here. And particularly in the two areas, in the blue area, the political area, I mean, we recognize that we can't do, at our level, we can't do a lot about the political level. This is largely about the interactions at the high level in our organizations with politicians. But what else is there we can do to prepare our senior managers and also to help them influence the process? And on the interinstitutional level, it'd be really interesting to know what's worked well in your countries, and importantly, what's not gone so well, so we can all learn from that. So I'd really like to open up for you to tell us about your experiences, and if you have any questions for the authors, please ask them now.
Thank you. I want to bring a bit outside you and also bring back a bit the perspective of the first session we had on Monday morning. First of all, I appreciate very much the contribution from both the authors here, because it links very well to the idea I had when I also heard this first morning, that it's not really on the hands of the Statistical Office to sort of the interest into harmonize data. It's not only or to integrate to find a place for all business entities. Is not only the interest of the statistical community. It's really an administrative task, or let's say political. I think very much the case from China illustrates that, and also when I showed on Monday morning the case of Norway, where there is a registered entity that collects everything, is outside the task of the Statistical Office to integrate this into one place where you can register all types of entities. Of course, it raises an issue, how is the interaction with the Statistical Office? Because there is some common interest, and it links to the legal situation, of course. To what extent can you exchange data in such a way? There are some data, and that has to be regulated in the law. What types of data can flow from the Statistical Office to the administrative authority? Because it has to do with the IC code, name, address. You get information that could be exchanged to the registered authority. And this is an important issue, to have a sort of clear, transparent way how the Statistical Office can cooperate with this administrative authority. And that's the link a bit to this issue about the legal context of that, I think. And of course, it's more the task of this administrative authority also to ensure that they can use all sorts of data to update this issue about updating of the business register, our administrative business register, which then the Statistical Office cannot copy. And the second question is that what is actually the purpose of the Statistical Business Register? Is it to make the analysis of economic development? It's a basis for collecting the data, mainly, in my view, because the data will be collected through the different surveys that the Statistical Office initiate using this business register. Because the business register has a limited content, it's basically to identify units, to use it as a basis for samples and for the total service. And in the long run, it will replace the economic surveys. That's a normal development, at least from our experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you, Chair. And I appreciate both the papers, quite valuable initiatives. My question is related to the SBR in China. And you have talked about the assigning the unified social credit identifier code. That's quite interesting. And you also talked about the challenges lies in promoting that code. So can you elaborate how you assign this code? I mean, what is the procedure to assigning the code to the different entities? And what kind of difficulties you are facing? Thank you.
If you have any more questions for Zhu Ting, yes, please.
Thank you. I'm Yu Kyung-gang from Statistics Korea. I have questions for Ms. Zhu Ting. First question is, does your SBR include informal sector? If so, how often do you update informal sector in SBR using what kind of data? And the second question is, it's been more than 20 years since you constructed SBR. Did you see any recognizable improved efficiency or cost reduction in carrying out the economic census, comparing before and after the construction of SBR? Thank you.
Well, thank you for your interest in my paper. And for the first question, I think we all know that it's essential for us to cooperate with administrative authorities. And for China's case, I think it is quite special because the central government realized the urgent to promote this unified system. Because when we do comparisons, we found it's always very, very difficult. And we lack the foundation of the unified code, unified system, and that's a big problem. And it also hinders the efficiency of the government. So we expect this system to greatly reduce the burden of the society, also try to enhance the efficiency of the government. And I think MBS, in this reform, first I want to make clear that MBS is not the main participant for the data sharing system, because I have told that it's centralized with SAIC. SAIC is responsible for the data sharing, and it has the largest quantity of information for the market players. So it sends the information to other departments which joined this reform. And with this, we receive the data, and on the meantime, we try to use them to update our SBR. And in return, we try to provide them with the statistical information that we can offer them. Of course, we have the contract, we have MOUs, and we said that this data should be confidential and only for statistical purposes or the management purposes. And the second question was the purpose for SBR. And I think, first, it is used as a tool for data collection, as you have mentioned, that nowadays in China, we have faced a large quantity of enterprises. And what we have to do is to keep the data coherent. Yes, and in the year before the year of 2009, we don't have a integrated, very integrated SBR system, and subject matters use their own registers to collect information, and of course they don't use our SBR at all. But from that, since the year of 2009, we have seen a very rapid development of SBR, and we try to make it as a basis for survey frames. And at the meantime, we want to use it as a tool to provide service, statistical service to other departments. And the third question. I'm sorry, the SCIC code. There are too many questions I didn't quite follow.
How are you dealing with the difficulties?
Oh, difficulties. Yes, of course, SCIC code, it was first promoted in the year of 2015. It hasn't experienced a long time. We found that the first thing is the code was first given to the births. Yes, it's quite easy for them to get a new SIC code, but for the existing enterprises, they need to change their licenses with another new ISIC code. And the department who is responsible for the code sharing, it's very, how to say, the working method, I think, is not very efficient, because it has to deliver separate the segment of the code to the provincial statistical agencies to give them the code, and that's the way. That's why they have duplicates. And I have mentioned that this is quite difficult to solve, because once the enterprises get the code, they don't want to change it. They don't want to get a new one. I think that's the biggest problem. And fourth question, we don't have. Our SBR doesn't cover the informal sector, and we only covers legal entities and establishments. So I think maybe I can come back and get some new ideas from my colleagues who are doing research of this. Thank you. And last question, I didn't quite follow you. Would you please say it again? Thank you.
You told me you constructed SBR in 1996, right? So yes. It's been more than 20 years since then. So did you see any recognizable improved efficiency or cost reduction in carrying out the economic census, comparing before and after the construction of SBR?
Yes, of course. As I have just introduced, before the year of 2009, our SBR, although there is SBR, but none of the subject matters want to use this, because it is not up to date, and all the subject matters keep their own registers, and we have not a unified system. But since the year of 2009, the NBS realized the problem and tried to enforce that all the subject matters should use SBR as the only frame for all the enterprises surveys. So I think it has experiencing a very good development compared to the past. Thank you.
Okay, one more.
Okay. Who has the most burning question? Sir, please.
Thank you so much, Chairman. I'm Kin Soblek from Cambodia, Statistics Office. And thank you presentation from speakers, Chinese speakers. Regarding to this SBR in China, yes, I would like to get some experience from China. Let's say every day the number of establishment or enterprise increasingly, and some of them also close their business operation and can bankruptcy something. I would like to know how do you updating with the newborn establishment or enterprise and the closing enterprise. When you recognize the death of establishment or enterprise, whether do you delete it from the SBR system, or you still keep the dead establishment or enterprise in the system? Thank you.
Well, thank you for your question. As a matter of fact, you have mentioned the point that we have facing a large quantity of births, and meantime, lots of enterprises close their business. For our SBR, we have a strategy that is to maintain our SBR once annually. That is the regular basic unit survey. We try to get information from the administrative departments, like I just mentioned, from the SAIC, and that's the biggest data provider for our SBR. And of course, we find some problems. The births are often very clear and sometimes it's more accurate, but the deaths, they don't want to register in this SAIC. And what we have to do is try to verify this the information, and we have colleagues in the roots, and they will collect the information from the administrative departments and try to find these units and verify their information. And that is the way we try to maintain our SBR. And for those closed their business, we won't delete them immediately. We will keep them for a year's time. Thank you.
So we have to have lunch now, I believe. So thank you ever so much to the presenters again and for your interesting questions, and hopefully you will have more questions for them later today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mashu, for sharing, Zuting, and Mr. Saeed. We will be back in this room at 2 o'clock. Recommence. Please all enjoy your lunch. There's the International Canteen, as well as other places you can visit, mentioned by my dear colleagues. See you soon.